Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Trek Politics. It's great to have you here. I'm Mary Trump with my friend and co-host Bob Cesca. Hi, Bob. We have what I think is going to be a fabulous episode because of the episode of Star Trek, the original series, we got to watch this week.
Most definitely. As always, Mary, spoilers ahead. This week, we're talking about The Ultimate Computer from Season 2, written by the great D.C. Fontana, based on a story by Lawrence N. Wolfe and directed by John Meredith Lucas. In this episode, Star Trek predicts AI. The Enterprise is assigned by Starfleet to test Dr. Richard Daystrom's M5 multitronic computer, which has the potential to replace the entire crew of a starship, forcing our heroes to question whether they'll have a career or be replaced by automation. Daystrom installs and activates the M5 aboard the Enterprise, which will be tested in a war game scenario against Commodore Bob Wesley's Starship Lexington. But things go horribly awry when the M5 fails to understand how war games work and attacks both an unmanned or freighter, then several Constitution-class starships, killing hundreds. Yes, it's another Star Trek episode with a self-aware, megalomaniacal supercomputer. And as I said, this is a cautionary tale about AI, decades before AI existed, Mary.
It's an incredible episode. It's complex, and we are going to cover all of it. So, buckle up.
Incoming transmission.
Trek Politics with Mary L. Trump and Bob Cesca.
So, The Ultimate Computer, which, as Bob mentioned, is prescient. Bob, there's so much about this episode to love, and there's so much about this episode that mystified me. As I said, it's complex. It includes some of our favorite things about Star Trek. It takes place entirely on the Enterprise. Our core crew is all there, and there are deep philosophical discussions about the issues presented and some demonstrations of real friendship and camaraderie. And empathy.
Oh, yes.
I want to start, though, with this premise of war games, because that is not my federation.
Yeah.
So I found just from the very beginning, the idea that a computer should render useless the vast majority of the crew in order to prepare for war games to be a non-starter. It made me uncomfortable, to put it that way. So I was curious what you thought of that as a starting point. Now, again, I don't think it ruined the episode by any stretch of the imagination, but it did raise some questions for me about how Starfleet actually thinks of itself sometimes.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I'm right there with you. I thought this was an outstanding episode, but this was one of those areas where I think it's calling for us to suspend our disbelief with regard to the war game idea, because I guess if you really dig down to the idea of automating an entire starship for what is supposed to be an exploratory armada, this is not supposed to be a military operation. Starfleet is not inherently militaristic. So if you're talking about automating a starship on an exploratory mission, you really need to have crew members, because who is going to engage the strange new worlds and the new life and new civilizations if it's just the M5 computer talking in its 1960s computer voice in that way? That's not going to work. So I guess maybe they tried to justify this by saying, well, this will be effective in a battle scenario. But I don't see how they could possibly think that that would be an effective way to, for example, make first contact with a civilization, or to ignore the prime directive as the human crew members are always doing. There was a much larger question to this, which is, what does this mean to have full automation of a starship? What does this mean to eliminate the human element entirely?
You're right. In the grand scheme of things, it's a minor complaint, because what it does is set up the opportunity to have the kinds of conversations Kirk and McCoy and Spock have throughout the episode that really, to me, make the heart of this. And I also think there's an unexpected very Star Trek outcome that I'm pretty sure they weren't thinking about, that you mentioned earlier, the prescience of putting our lives, our futures in the hands of an untested technology that, quite frankly, is being developed by crazy people. Not to get too technical about it. But first, I want to talk about that very interesting distinction between the Daystrom approach, and actually the approach of Commodore Wesley and anybody else in Starfleet who signed off on this, and how the Enterprise crew thinks about it. And one of, to me, the most moving conversations occurs between Kirk and McCoy towards the beginning of the episode, when Kirk is told, hey, you're going to have a lot of time on your hands. Just enjoy it. And he's questioning, am I upset about this because it's my ego? Am I upset about this because, I need the power of being a Starfleet captain? But then another conversation they have, which is even deeper, is after Kirk is called Captain Dunsel, which I'll let you explain. And Kirk explains in a really moving way what it means to him to be an explorer, essentially. And he quotes the poem, "Give me a tall ship and a star to steer her by." And he's imagining how moving it must have been to be on a ship and with the sea beneath you and the wind blowing through across, and it's poetic and it's beautiful, and you can see the connection between that kind of exploration and the kind of exploration the Enterprise does, which is completely disregarded by the powers that be, who decided to put M5 in charge. And then later, we basically hear Daystrom saying, but this is a waste of time. Why should we have humans doing this stuff? They're just like, why should we have them be at risk? It's not worth it. That answered the question of what really matters. And it's Kirk and McCoy who have their fingers on the pulse of that. So if you could talk us through the Captain Dunsel thing and why that was so important for them, not just to have the conversation between them, but to come to those realizations themselves about why what they do matters so much and how dangerous Daystrom's vision is to that dream.
Right. Dunsel is a term in universe that was used by midshipmen in Starfleet Academy to describe a thing that is ultimately useless, that has no point in existing anymore. And straight up, I think it's Bob Wesley, straight up calls Captain Kirk Captain Dunsel, which is such a colossal insult. There's a whole other dimension with Commodore Wesley that I want to talk about in a second. But the psychology of the characters written into this episode by DC Fontana and the others was so prescient in terms of, I think, what we're all experiencing right now. Going to that quote, I need a tall ship and a star to steer her by. That whole thing, which I'll elaborate more on in Bobservations, but I think that's Captain Kirk looking for, in the same way I think many of us are looking for, a return to something that is familiar, something that feels normal. Like I think we're all talking about in the context of politics. We're all talking about the before times, how nice it was prior to Donald arriving on the scene, or even during the George W. Bush administration, how nice it was in remember the 1990s and how great that was. And that seems like what Captain Kirk was sort of saying. I remember what it was like prior to the internet existing. I think I've said that more than once. And that's the conundrum that he was facing. That conversation after he meets with Dr. Daystrom in engineering and he's installing the M5 computer, Bones and Captain Kirk talk in the hallway in the corridor outside. And Kirk straight up says to Bones, I think the thing is wrong and I don't know why. He's talking about the M5 computer. Right. This doesn't seem right to me, but I don't know why. How many of us have had that debate with ourselves about AI? I know I have.
Yeah, totally.
Because I've seen the possibility of it. I've been wowed by it. I mean, I think we've all at some point seen an image that's been created or some sort of thing that's been created by AI and gone, wow, that's incredible. Until you notice that there are 6 fingers and the weird.
It's incredible, but
yeah,
something's off.
Something is off, right? And then you start thinking about the environmental impact, the fact that AI is owned by billionaire tech bros that will be funneling more, just turning the entire economy upside down so more money can be funneled into their fortunes. And so we're all going through this debate. Yes, AI has significant potential when it comes to medicine, technology, green energy. The sky's the limit in terms of what this can develop. And Daystrom presents the M5 computer, the AI that is the M5 computer, as being beneficial toward this goal of a utopian society. Unfortunately, in 2026, AI is not geared toward creating a utopian society. It's, as I said, it's geared toward making billionaires richer and richer and richer. And, we've already seen, I think there are 70 million white collar employees in the United States right now. And the CEO of Microsoft's AI division is forecasting that AI will replace most, if not all, that's a direct quote, most, if not all, white collar workers within the next 18 months.
Yeah.
What's that going to do to the economy? So again, we're having this debate that Kirk is having with himself throughout this episode, very much like Balance of Terror. It's Captain Kirk having some self-doubt in terms of his place in this new world where an M5 computer exists.
Yeah. And one of the great things this episode does is that it creates the tension that allows for those conversations, right? Which would not otherwise take place.
Yeah.
I don't, Kirk and McCoy or McCoy and Spock wouldn't be discussing the potential redundancy of the captain of the Enterprise if his supremacy were challenged by this technology. And that is what we're seeing. And I think when when M5 chooses the landing party, after Kirk does, and Kirk is stricken from it, as is, I believe, McCoy.
Yeah.
And, the M5 has asked why he chose these lower ranking officers to go. Well, they have this specialization and they're qualified in this way. And there's no need for these 2 senior officers to go. And that changes the conversation, just as AI is changing. It's not working people. It's not the blue collar worker AI threatens. It's the livelihood of white collar workers. And in this episode, it's the command structure, actually. So again, prescient, and it gives us an opportunity to reckon with that, but also to understand that despite this, in my view, just bizarre war games thing and the redundancy issue.
Yeah.
What Starfleet is, it is not a military organization. It is about preserving all of the things Daystrom seems to reject. The exploration, even if it's at risk. The finding new civilizations and making common cause with them and acquiring more knowledge, even if it's dangerous at times, it's worth it. He doesn't see that at all. And I mean, maybe it's cheating a little bit to make him essentially an unhinged crazy person. Kind of stacks the deck against his argument, but still it helps clarify things.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that Daystrom seems a bit off because, quite honestly, we see the M5 computer making Captain Kirk crazy himself. Like Captain Kirk becomes completely unhinged, seeing the destruction and death that the M5 computer, is responsible for.
Well, and his helplessness, exactly, his helplessness in the face of it.
Going back to that conversation with Bones in the corridor after they meet Dr. Daystrom, Kirk straight up says, I'm getting a red alert right here. And he touches the back of his head. He said, that
Yeah.
thing is dangerous. So he can see it coming down Main Street. He knows that this thing has the potential for destruction. Bones later on brings up, I think, a pretty good point to Dr. Daystrom, in which he says, well, what happens if the M5 malfunctions and there's no crew members here to fix it? What happens then? There could be a major, major disaster. And so this is all forecasting what we eventually see. And when it comes to Commodore Wesley, and this goes back to the whole war games thing, because the M5 computer ends up forcing the Enterprise to fire on these other Constitution class starships. Wesley at the same time is going, yeah, what's going on with Captain Kirk? Why is Captain Kirk doing this to us?
Yeah.
And it's Commodore Wesley's idea. This is more, I guess, more of a nitpick, but it's Commodore Wesley's idea to do these war games with the M5 computer seizing full control over the Enterprise. So why is he suddenly blaming Captain Kirk?
Mm-hmm.
With all of us being on the cusp of this new technology, not knowing exactly where it's going to lead, but having some idea, sort of reminds me of the middle to late 1990s, where we saw the internet coming and we had never seen anything like that on the horizon before. And it was pretty hopeful. I think I was pretty optimistic about the promise of the internet, but it never occurred to me how destructive it could actually end up being. You know who was on the forefront of predicting both the promise and peril of the internet is David Bowie. I always go back to, there was an interview with David Bowie in the 90s where he's like, yeah, this is going to change the world significantly. And the interview was like, I don't know. It seems like a trend to me. And David Bowie's like, no. This is going to be beyond anything we can possibly imagine. And I think that's a little scary. And there are warning signs with AI that could end up being immensely destructive and actually rack up a death toll.
Oh, yeah. And it's fascinating. You say that about David Bowie. Both he and Frank Zappa were saying things 3 or 4 decades ago that would still be relevant today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it is amazing. Like, we just don't learn.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have more and more advanced technologies falling into the wrong hands. And that was one of the things I want to talk about Commodore Wesley and his odd discrepancies in the way he approaches things in a second. But one of the things I found most alarming about this episode was how it reminded me of what it's like Donald is the M5. And there are no constraints. There's no way to constrain him. And the result is more and more power accruing to him amidst more and more destruction caused by him. And there's no Commodore Wesley or Captain Kirk in our scenario.
That's why you need the human element.
Right.
With the M5, and to an extent, I think it's safe to say that AI is modern AI, the actual real world AI that we're dealing with right now. There's no nuance there that humans tend to provide. So with the M5, that ship fired on me. I don't understand that this is a war game, so I'm going to fire back, and I'm going to put phasers on full before I do. It's not going to be whatever 0.01% that the human crew of the Enterprise wanted to set it at, appropriate for the war games. And that very much reminded me of Donald. There is no nuance with Donald. He's constantly, as you know, he's constantly only thinking about what the next step is. And usually that step is dictated by, I've done something stupid in the previous step that I need to retcon and fix with the next step that gets him even more trouble. It's my ongoing theme. Donald always makes things worse for Donald. And
you have been saying that since at least 2016.
Yeah.
So, we've known people. We've known.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And this, once again, we're all in this place, and there's this whole other separate economic component of AI that we're all, and especially I'm starting to warn people about on my podcast. But it was just like in 2016, just like in 2024, one of the refrains of the past year is, we warned you people. We were talking about what tariffs are going to do to prices. We warned you what it was going to look like when Donald starts deporting people, the human atrocities that will take place. We told you that he wasn't going to repair the economy on or whatever people perceived was wrong with the economy on day one. He wasn't going to reduce inflation. And even if he did, even if he reduced inflation to 0%, prices would still be where they were the previous month.
Right.
So we were doing all of this warning, right? And it was kind of disregarded. And so I hope at some point when it comes to AI, it really has us by the short hairs right now, because there's either the very real potential of the AI bubble bursting, all of this investment not showing any return whatsoever, or the promised return, and that severely impacting the broader economy, because the GDP right now is buoyed by the existence of AI and all this investment in data centers. And on the other hand, if it succeeds and there is no bubble burst that goes along with it, that could mean serious job loss and a redirecting of the economy where so much more money, as I said before, is flowing into the pockets of billionaires, the billionaire, the Epstein class in this country, where instead of making them richer, we should be taxing the billionaire class at 90%.
Of course.
Especially knowing that their wealth grew. I'm talking about American billionaires. Wealth grew by $1.5 trillion in 2025.
Think about it this way. Over the course of the last 20 years, or maybe it's 30 now, the federal minimum wage remains $7.25.
That's right.
When you say tax them at 90%, just for context, that's how multimillionaires and if there even were billionaires back then, were taxed under the Eisenhower administration, a Republican. So this is not a new idea. This is not some, crazy leftist idea.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that people still can't be insanely wealthy. It just means that past a certain point, you have to pay more because nobody gets as rich as Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, without massive assists from other people and in some cases the federal government. So no, these are not self-made men. And even if they were, still clearly stuff broke their way.
Yeah.
So I think the problem we've created for ourselves is that if the AI bubble does burst, these people will have been made so wealthy that it's the rest of us who will be impoverished, and they will still get what they want, which is a permanent underclass and their ability to divvy things up amongst themselves. So, I'm not exactly suggesting that if M5 had been successful, that's what would have happened in Star Trek. But I think your point is a really good one. The problem here is a lack of humanity.
Mm-hmm. That's right. What
happens when you take the human, which is to say the best of the human, because obviously Donald and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are human beings. They're just horrible ones who don't have the best of us in them. They don't have empathy. They don't have compassion. They don't have anything that makes being human worthwhile. So you take that kind of humanity out of the equation, which is, I think, McCoy is the best spokesperson for this in this
Very
episode.
much so. Yeah.
Then what is the point of us, truly?
Yeah.
And that brings us back to Commodore Wesley, who was kind of a walking contradiction on the one hand. He, at the beginning, is all gung-ho about this very anti-Starfleet initiative. But at the end, it's his knowledge of James Kirk and his compassion that makes him do the right thing ultimately. So I'm curious what you think about that arc.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And that ends up winning the day. Absolutely. And so we're talking about, just going back to Elon Musk and the billionaires who are now controlling AI. There is no benevolence there. There is no compassion there. It's all about, like, I need to increase my wealth as much as possible. I mean, Elon Musk was just responsible for the biggest merger in the history of any American corporation, the merger between xAI and SpaceX. The goal that Elon Musk is seeking to achieve through this merger is an orbital data center.
Yeah.
Where he wants to create an xAI data center in space.
Please, is he going to move there? That's all I want.
I certainly hope so. Boy, wouldn't that be... It would
be better if it were on Mars, but I guess he's looking for the moon now.
Just to give you an idea in terms of Elon Musk's wealth, and specifically the wealth he attained just in 2025 alone. And I don't mean to go off on too much of a rant about this, but this is the guy who's controlling the future of not just the economy, but the future of technology through xAI and so forth. Elon Musk, his wealth grew by $307 billion in 2025. Let's put that into perspective, because I know those of us who are into space exploration and things like this, we deal in these large numbers. What does that number, what does $307 billion actually mean to those of us who will never, ever see that amount of money? Well, just imagine for a second, Mary, you're done for the day. You go down to the local bodega, you buy a lottery ticket, scratch off ticket, you scratch it off, and you find out, oh my God, I just won $1 million. The increase in Elon Musk's wealth last year is the equivalent of 307,000 $1 million scratch off tickets. That is a his wealth grew by 73% last year, while he was cutting USAID, which in the long run may amount to 9 million deaths.
If these people don't go to the Hague and aren't put in prison, and if we don't have like our Nuremberg type trials and reparations and reconciliations, then we are lost as a people. That's right. Because so far, 700,000 people are dead directly because Elon Musk and Donald cut USAID, and 450,000 of those people were children. Yep. These people have so much blood on their hands. And, you know, let me put it a slightly different way. For Elon Musk, that $1 million you won on your scratch off ticket, that's just the change he finds under his couch cushion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So why that was ever allowed to happen, let's thank Ronald Reagan for that, shall we?
And his war against the middle class, which he declared almost right away. Yeah, what you do is you tax people like Elon Musk on $1 of their wealth at 90% as an effective tax rate, and then you use that money to rebuild the middle class that Ronald Reagan began destroying in 1981.
Absolutely.
It's as simple as that. You know, people can't afford healthcare right now. People can't afford groceries right now. The unemployment situation is untenable. People can't afford housing. People can't afford rent. And we all experienced a tax increase in 2025. Every household, every consumer paid $1,000 more because of Donald's tariffs. And at the same time, Elon Musk and all the billionaires we've talked about, Larry Ellison, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, they all got tax cuts.
That's right.
And their wealth increased across the board among all American billionaires by 22% in 2025. I can tell you that my income and my savings did not increase by 22% last year. I know this is really far afield, but these are the people who are controlling the future of technology, the future of communications, the future of everything that is now going to be built upon this new AI platform and series of platforms.
But also, it's a broader issue than that. Although AI is currently the biggest danger we're facing, it's also the fact that they are in control of social media and are largely responsible for the siloing of information. And TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, or Meta, which includes Instagram, are all controlled by people who are essentially owned by Donald at this point.
Yes.
Or allowing themselves to be used by him because they need him to get more government contracts so they can become richer. I just found out today that Substack is now partnering with Polymarkets. Why? I do not know. Polymarkets is like a a betting thing. It's like sports betting on steroids. You can bet on anything on Polymarkets. You know who is on the board of Polymarkets?
Don Jr.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
not a
Google.
surprise. And that is an enormous platform for corruption, by the way. And what we have seen is the very real potential for people to have advanced knowledge for what's about to happen and then to place bets through Polymarket on events that they're already, it's like insider trading, but with the prediction markets is what they're
totally.
they're
Oh
called.
my goodness.
Yeah.
People have made so much money. I don't remember the specific instance, quite honestly, but it was something, it was so obvious that there was insider trading going on because it was a bet on something Donald did, you know, and the people who cashed in were the obvious, the usual suspects, I should say. So in some ways it was a really heavy episode, but I found it very uplifting. And I felt very connected to the characters. So I really appreciated it. And I think, well, we'll talk about after my favorite segment of the show, we'll talk about, you know, our assessment of this episode. But it is time for Bobservations.
All right, Mary. So let's start here. The voice of the M5 is none other than James Doohan, who plays Scotty, as we all know. Yeah. Cool. Doohan also performs the voice of Commodore Enright, who we actually never see on screen. So Doohan is pulling triple duty on this episode. Wow. And also Scotty was great. I mean, we barely mentioned him at all in this episode. Yeah, but he was really good. Once again, Star Trek gives us an entity that looks like an ocular migraine.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Oh, God. The circular screen on the M5 looks just like the multicolored image that ocular migraine sufferers see in their field of vision.
What is up with that?
I don't know.
Come on,
I mean,
guys.
We saw it in Day of the Dove. We saw it as the initial view screen appearance of the Metrons or Metrones in Arena. And it just seems to be a common thing, really funky. And I think emerges from the idea that color TVs were brand new. I think that's the color palette of Star Trek. And by extension, shows like Batman and the Brady Bunch really wanted to emphasize the colorful aspects of color TV.
I mean, it's very 60s. It's very 60s.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So as we all know, Dr. Daystrom's name appears throughout the rest of the Star Trek saga. In particular, the Daystrom Institute is named for him, as well as the Daystrom Award and the Daystrom Station in Picard Season 3, even though his janky M5 computer is responsible for the deaths of over 400 Starfleet personnel. This also raises the question, how many people were killed by the unsuccessful testing of multitronic units 1 through 4? Because we're on number 5 and there were 4 previous units. I just sure hope there weren't death tolls to go along with those other iterations.
One would hope.
So I have no idea if this was intentional, but in this episode, Kirk seems physically small. Perhaps to indicate visually that his purpose aboard the Enterprise is being minimized by technology. So when Commodore Wesley first arrives in the transporter room aboard the Enterprise, he seems much taller, photographed standing on the transporter pad's step high above Captain Kirk. Then there's Dr. Daystrom, played by the great William Marshall, who is significantly taller than William Shatner, Captain Kirk. Even Spock and Bones appear taller. I don't know why I noticed this in this episode.
That's kind of fascinating.
Some of the scenes are staged to seemingly emphasize the height difference between Kirk and the others. Again, no idea if this was intentional, but it definitely works. I mean, that was one of the visual cues I took away from this episode, connecting to Kirk's place in this emerging technology. So, speaking of Kirk's possible irrelevance, Commodore Wesley straight up calls him, as we discussed before, Captain Dunsel. Dunsel being a word used by midshipmen in Starfleet Academy to describe a useless part. In other words, Wesley calls Kirk useless. I wonder what Kirk did to Wesley to deserve such an insult. In my headcanon, Kirk stole Wesley's girlfriend at some point, and that may have been it. So those of us who loved Picard season 3 know that by the time we reach the early 25th century, it turns out automation can run a starship with minimal crew. This is how Captain Picard and the others operate the refurbished Enterprise D in the battle against the Borg cube, which is a significant triumph, not just for our heroes from Next Generation and Picard season 3, but also for Geordi LaForge's automated Enterprise D, that they were successful in attacking a Borg cube. Amazing. Also, quoting Memory Alpha, Spock mentions that there is nothing in 23rd century computer technology to replace a starship's medical officer. But by the 24th century, however, Federation starships are equipped with emergency medical holograms.
Right.
The Doctor, Robert Picardo's amazing character, and apologies to Bones.
Yes.
One more thing from Memory Alpha. This is the 4th time Kirk talks a computer to death, as we see toward the end of this episode. He used this skill in The Changeling. He used this skill in The Return of the Archons. And of course, he uses this skill in I, Mud.
Oh my God, you're right.
Talks a computer to death. So if you listen carefully, when the Enterprise first encounters the Excalibur and the Lexington, Chekhov says Wessels instead of vessels. I don't understand why Commodore Wesley blames Kirk for attacking the other starship, Wessels. We talked about this before. Wesley obviously knew about the M5 controlling the Enterprise. Why didn't he blame the M5 for the attack? Jumps right to...
It's weird.
Captain Kirk has turned into a homicidal maniac. Why is Captain Kirk doing that?
No, and it would have been so much easier to say, oh my God, the M5 is out of control. And even though we know it's not Captain Kirk, we still have to destroy the ship because it's going to kill us all.
Exactly.
I mean, that would have been awful, but that would have made more sense.
Yeah. And once again, the M5 computer is making everyone's cheese slide off their crackers. I mean, everyone is losing their mind because of this computer. So there's a couple of great scenes in which Bones advises Kirk like a sort of de facto therapist. One scene in Engineering, Bones brings Kirk a drink, which mirrors a very similar scene in The Cage between Captain Pike and Dr. Boyce, whose first name, by the way, is Philip, as in Dr. Phil. Yes, the first doctor aboard the Enterprise was Dr. Phil.
No.
I'm so sorry.
Different one entirely. Stop it.
This is where Bobservations makes me a little nauseous. I'm sorry. I've done this to myself.
You have.
So in the aforementioned Kirk Bones drink scene, Kirk quotes John Macefield's Sea Fever. All I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. This line is also quoted on the dedication plaque on the USS Defiant in Deep Space Nine. Kirk speaks the line again aboard the shuttlecraft Galileo in the Shatner-directed Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. This episode has another amazing bit of Shatner stunt work. When the M5 zaps Kirk.
Yes, the force field. That was good.
Yeah, he goes airborne, lands on the floor, and then slides across the room for a good 8 or 9 feet.
And musses up his hair.
That's right. I noticed that too. That was all Shatner. Then after the commercial break, we return to Engineering, where Kirk does this amazing line read. He uses his index finger to jab Daystrom in the ribcage and says, rapid fire, as though all one word, all right, doctor, you built this thing. How do you propose to turn it off? And it's just like one smooth, all one word. One of my favorite Kirk line reads in the entire original series. So snappy.
Yeah, and I found the fact that his finger is literally touching, like jabbed in between his ribs. Like that was fascinating because that's invasive. And it just shows you how angry and, well, of course, his crewman had just been murdered by M5.
Yes.
Which is to say Dr. Daystrom. So, yeah, I agree with you. I thought that was a very cool and alarming moment.
And it's a classic Shatner move. He does it in the Omega Glory. Do you understand? And jabs him right in the rib cage. As a general survey party is assigned to beam down to the surface of Alpha Carinae 2, the members of the landing party, including Spock, are assigned by the M5, contradicting Captain Kirk. First of all, Spock never reports to the transporter room to join the landing party. And if the crew members were ever beamed down to the planet, which is unclear, they're never heard from again. The Enterprise ends up breaking orbit for the war games and zero mention as to whether they were. Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Turns out, in addition to being a self-aware megalomaniacal supercomputer, the M5 also suffers from ADHD. I'm imagining the landing party down on the planet like, hello?
Hello?
What? Are they going to come back for us? I don't know. There's maybe a whole spin-off series of this landing party that's left on the planet as the entire, every character. No one ever mentions that landing party again.
Well, it's kind of like Khan. This is CD Alpha 5.
That's right. There could have been a whole movie, right? With a slug in Chekhov's ear and the whole 9 yards. And finally, the M5 ain't that smart, Mary. When Kirk asks it what the penalty for murder happens to be, the M5 says death. In fact, there is no death penalty in the Federation other than General Order 7, which calls for the death penalty for anyone who visits Talos 4. But there is no death penalty for murder in the Federation Starfleet. Yes.
Yes. I found that really alarming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Bravo, as always.
Thank you.
And also bravo to this episode. So
yes.
how do you rank this episode?
You know what? I was thinking on a scale of 1 to 10, I give this a good 8.5, maybe 8.5, somewhere in that range. What do you think?
I was just thinking of it in terms of where I rank it in the episodes. I'd say definitely top 15, if not top 10.
Oh yeah. I'm going to go with top 10 on this one.
Yeah, I top that for sure. Because I would watch this over and over and over again, for sure.
Same. Just so much credit, again, to everyone involved in this. Obviously, DC Fontana. Once again, if you see DC Fontana's name come up in the opening credits, you know you're in for a great episode. And good Lord, they nailed what was going to happen 60 years later with AI. Just an amazing thing. And it wasn't just the technology itself, which I presume you could probably extrapolate that out as they did, but the human reaction to it, the confusion and fear that it rightfully generates. It's almost as though they had a time machine and just jumped into, 2026 and realized, there's going to be a lot of conflicted people because this is cool technology. It's just, we don't know where it's going to go. And that's terrifying. Yeah.
It is. And if only all of these people in the Republican Party who purport to love Star Trek actually paid attention to the message of Star Trek, maybe we wouldn't be in such a terrifying place. But luckily, we always have Star Trek to escape to, thankfully.
Yes.
So again, if you haven't watched this episode, go watch it now. It is amazing. And I think I'm actually going to watch it again.
Yeah, same.
Maybe tonight. So thank you everybody for being here with me and Bob. We will be back, of course, next week for the next episode of Trek Politics. Take it easy.